Yeah.
and you bring that and you figure out how to
Yeah.
create that. So that's been the evolution.
I love it. I love it so much. And I think that community to me is one of my core values that has always been there. And so building community, making those safe places for supporting one another is it's just so important to our journey as entrepreneurs because we can't do this alone, right?
Can't do
It's
it alone. And Kimmy, as humans, like dare I say, it's like
we're not
important
yeah.
to
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, like, I never thought I needed community. Like, this was
Yeah.
never I'm an introvert. I'm a loner. I travel by myself. And I think what that time in the world taught me was in those moments of challenge and those moments where your foundation is kind of
Mm-hmm.
shaken.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I first started realizing like I needed safe spaces
Yeah.
and whatever that looks like for whoever, right? Like
Yeah.
either find or build those spaces. For
Yeah.
some people, it's a religious thing, right? Like they find a church community, and that's
Yeah.
their foundation. You know,
Hello, my extraordinary women friends. As we step into this new year, I'm so inspired by the voices of women who are choosing to listen to their inner knowing, embrace change, and lead with courage and purpose. Today's guest, Kamilah Martin, is one of those women. She's the founder and CEO of Katalyst, a consulting and coaching company that's redefining the relationship between work and wellness for women of color in the nonprofit world. Kamilah took a bold leap from being an executive and primary breadwinner to become an entrepreneur, and her story is one of courage, resilience, and deep listening to that inner voice that whispers, "It's time." Through Katalyst and the nonprofit consultant mastermind community that Kamilah leads, she is creating spaces where women of color can confidently step into entrepreneurship, find balance, and support one another. That lights me up. I love women supporting women. Her work is all about turning overwhelm into clarity and helping women rise up together. In this episode, we'll dive into Kamilah's journey and the powerful lessons she's learned about fear and trusting yourself. We also talk about the current status of the consulting industry and how we really both feel like 2025 is opening up into new spaces for those of you in the consulting world. If you've been feeling a calling to make a change in your life or your career, this conversation is here to remind you that you're not alone and you're capable of amazing things. Let's meet Kamilah Martin. Well, welcome to Extraordinary Women Radio, Kamilah. It's so great to have you here today.
thank you, Cami. It's good to be here. And we didn't even talk
Yeah,
about this. We both have the same first four letters.
I know. I don't find that very often.
Yes, and
I
people call
totally
me
don't.
Cami as well. So this is
Oh,
this
that's
is
awesome.
the first.
So, do they shorten it to Cami for you at some
Cami or
points?
Cam. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's awesome. I love it.
Yep.
I totally love it. And people will often ask me if it's short for something. I'm like, nope, that's
Oh,
it.
it's not.
That's
Oh, I assumed
no.
it was. Oh,
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
Cool.
exactly. Well, so nice to meet you. Tell us where you're at.
I am in Orlando, Florida.
Oh, nice. I bet it's nice and warm there.
It's actually chilly. I mean, this is the time of year that I actually enjoy. I'm from DC, Maryland area, so I
Mm-hmm.
like the seasons in the winter. So
Mm-hmm.
we had, I think, 40s the other night, so it's very seasonal.
Oh, yeah.
Raining right now, which is unusual, but yeah, I think we're supposed to bounce back to some nicer weather
Okay.
sometime
Well,
next week.
cool.
Yeah.
We're actually in the 40s here in Colorado, so which is, we've got sunshine and it's dry. It's a dry 40s. We're not in the wet
Okay.
40s, so it's pretty nice out today. I'm enjoying
Okay.
that.
Enjoy.
Yeah, so you made that big leap from executive to entrepreneur, and you were the main breadwinner. You were, the one bringing home the paychecks. Tell us what that moment was that said this is the time to do this right now.
Oh boy, yeah. So it was interesting. I had been working as a vice president at an international humanitarian organization, and I was working for that organization about 8 or 9 years, I
Mm-hmm.
believe. And I was in a senior leadership position. This was during COVID times when the world was
Mm-hmm.
turned upside down and everything that we thought we had known about life didn't exist anymore, practically. And it was also the George Floyd era. So there was a lot kind of swirling, in
Mm-hmm.
the atmosphere at that time. And, there were some things going on at work where I just sort of decided I couldn't be my body representing that organization, if that makes any
Right.
sense. So
Totally
I
makes
decided
sense.
I needed to go. It was for
Yeah.
sort of my mental health, my health.
Yeah.
And it was just a moment where I said, I don't know what's next, but I know this isn't where I need to be right now.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because during that time, as soon as I had resigned, people started sending me opportunities. And I was just like, I'm not ready. Like, I felt there was some healing that I needed to do. I knew that I couldn't kind of contribute to organizations in the way that I would need to be successful in the roles.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just made an intentional pause, and I called it my fake retirement, or,
Mm,
at the time where I didn't quite know what I was going to do, I did still need income. So I just kind of fell into consulting. And I had a
yeah.
friend at the time who had just taken on a presidency role at an organization, and she kind of heard about my transition and asked if I could just sort of help her stabilize things for a little bit. And that turned into another opportunity, which turned into another opportunity. And here, 4 years later, I am still consulting and experimenting with the entrepreneurship game. And it's been incredible. It really has. I've learned so much about myself, and
Isn't
sort of
that the truth?
that my power,
It's the biggest personal journey, personal growth
Mhm.
journey,
And
being
it's
an
every day.
entrepreneur.
Honestly,
Yeah.
every day I'm learning something different about my capabilities, and how far I can push the limits. And you mentioned, of course, I was the breadwinner. So my husband at the time was a stay-at-home dad, and was pretty much the entire time that our kids were young. And so I just remember saying, like, I've got to go. And he was like, okay, well, we'll figure it out. And I was just like, no, you don't understand. Like, I have to leave today. So it was one of those rip the band-aid off situations where I
Yeah.
just kind of had to figure it out. And I feel very fortunate. And I say this all the time. I had savings. Like, I had worked really hard. I was
Mm-hmm.
40, I think, at the time. So I had, 25 years of working, or 20 years of working, and I had savings, and I had a healthy retirement,
Right.
which, again, I was very unfortunate for, that allowed me to be a bit riskier. And so instead of sort of clinging on saying I can't use any of this, my mindset was that I've paid into this, so now it's time for me to
Exactly.
pay out, a little
Yeah.
bit for a
Yeah.
season. Like, it's not forever,
Yeah.
but I needed that return on me as the investment.
And
So.
that break was probably really important, that pause. I mean, I know for me, when I left the corporate world, which has been 16 years ago, and I took actually more than 16 years ago, it'll be 17 years in 2025.
Mm.
And I I took 17 months before I
Hmm.
figured out what the heck I was meant to do. And I did need that space and time.
Hmm.
And
Yep.
people kept saying, slow down, take time. And I was like, yeah, 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 you sure. And, for me, that pause was really important. It was that place where I paused and like really reconnected back to me and found values that I had lost touch with. Did you find you had lost touch with some values in the mix of all of that?
I think I had stayed pretty true to my values. I think
Uh-huh.
what I lost was creativity.
Mm-hmm.
And I never really considered myself a creative person. Like, I wasn't an artist, but when I think about it, like, I took dance all throughout high school and into college. And then, like, I remember as a youngster, I was like to draw, just kind of like, hobby
Yeah.
sort of thing. But
Yeah.
during that period, I tapped back into it. It was so just innate. Like,
Yeah.
again, mind you, this was COVID time, so people are taking up gardening and baking and finding sort of those innovations and pieces of themselves that they perhaps had been missing because we had so much more time. I actually took up photography,
Yeah.
and it's a really fascinating story because I remember I had bought this really fancy camera when my daughter was born and never used it. I just planned, like, I spent a lot of money on this camera and, like, was going to just take some pictures of her crawling around, and never learned how to really use it. And I had gotten the opportunity to do this fellowship with an organization called the Knoll Farm, where I got to live in a yurt in the mountains of Vermont for a week. And I
Oh,
told
cool.
myself what I was going to do was to learn this camera. So the entire time I was there, I was, watching YouTube videos, and I had bought this, like, I don't know, DSLR camera for dummies type of book. And I literally all day long was just learning the camera, walking around the property, taking photos. And I came out with some really good stuff. And then by the end of that, like, I had officially declared myself a photographer. And because I got
Love
such
it.
good feedback from, everyone who was there, who was pursuing their own sort of projects and, art and artistic endeavors, or even, other entrepreneurial endeavors. And it was something that I just needed during that time. And I discovered just, again, so much about the quieting down and, turning inward, and all of that I had never known existed.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I sent those photos off to something, got a paid gig to go shoot in the National Cascades, or the North Cascades National Park, with
Oh,
this big
awesome.
fancy environmental organization. And so it's like, those are just signs for me that
Yeah.
when you listen to those inner things, right, those
Yeah.
feelings that you have, and stop trying to be so in your head about them, like the path just sort of opens up for you. And I
Yeah.
think, for whatever reason, I've been very attuned to that throughout my life. And when I look at the through line through a lot of the things I've done, it's just follow that intuition.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and getting still and quiet was really what
Yeah.
helped me
Yeah.
discover that.
And that was for me. I mean, it's the same. It's like I reconnected to nature. I reconnected to things that I love to do. Reconnected to my,
Mhm.
time with horses. I mean, it's like all
Mhm.
that sort of thing just takes us down to the core of who we are, so that we can move into the work that we're really being called to do. And I think you were
Absolutely.
really called. I know Katalyst, your company, is all about work and wellness for women of color in the nonprofit world.
Mhm.
So why does this mission matter so much to you?
Well, it's sort of my story, Cami. It's
Yeah,
like, it's
yeah,
where I came from, right? And
yeah.
all the things I've created since then have been the things that I've needed. And what's been really interesting, I was always a very shy person online. Felt like I had to show up a certain way and present myself a certain way. And then when I left the job, it's sort of just this freedom just opened to just be myself, because I didn't have to
Mm,
worry about sort of
right.
what people were thinking as
Isn't
much.
that wonderful to
Oh
lose
my
all that
gosh.
mask?
It's amazing. And it's what's so
Yeah,
sad is how
exactly.
long we've, worn those masks,
Yeah, yeah,
and how many of us still are. And I think,
yeah,
there's some people who are able to navigate life in their true selves. And I
yeah,
applaud them, and I want
yeah,
to, like, buy books that they write, right, to figure out how to do that. But it took me leaving all of those, like shedding all of that stuff to get to that place. And again, I was 40. So I feel like there's something about that turning point as well that, I don't know, opens up some things for you in certain situations. But yeah, I think that was a really important part of sort of my journey and transition. And also, I started being more vocal about my journey. Women from all over the world literally were reaching out to me saying, "Oh, this is fascinating. This is my story. This resonates for me. How are you doing it?" And I was just like, well, I'm still figuring it out, but why don't we figure it out together? Like,
yeah.
I have proposal templates. It doesn't make sense for you to be over there creating your own if I can share what I have. And so that's really how Katalyst was built, just creating this ecosystem of support for us to feel kind of taken care of and safe as we're navigating this transition.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about the evolution of how that, I know you run a nonprofit consultant mastermind community. Tell
Mhm.
us a little bit more about how that evolved into that space.
Sure. So initially, it was me needing to understand, or me starting to learn how to build a business from scratch.
Hmm.
And as I started talking about it more, and the women who were also interested in that pivot, they came to me and I said, let's create this mastermind community. So we had initially a cohort model,
Hmm.
where, we had, I think it was like a 6 or 9 week thing where, I think the first one was about 25 women who joined, and we had speakers who came in who talked about sort of the business of building your business, the brass tacks of, do I need to be an S corp or an LLC? How do I deal with health insurance? And those things that we never really had to think about when we were
Right.
working, in
Right.
house. So
Hmm.
building all of that, and then it evolved because what I discovered was, while the women really appreciated that, the basics, they
Hmm.
wanted community more than anything else.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
now communities everywhere, right? Like, we hear it, people are building these communities and these places for people to come together. I would say in 2020, it was still
Yeah.
kind of new. Like, there were
Yeah.
definitely some out there, but
Hmm.
we were the first one like ours to do it. I think we still are the first one and only one that has our specific niche. And so it evolved. It evolved into focusing mainly on just building community. And the way I define that is safe spaces where people can come and be their full selves,
Hmm.
spaces where you feel like you have some sort of shared experience with others who are part of it, where you can learn from and also offer, something to the space. We
Hmm.
started fully online, obviously, during COVID times, but now we're doing a lot more in person events. So
Okay.
people are traveling together. We hold retreats and events for our members. So that's the evolution. And I
Yeah.
think that's, kind of indicative of entrepreneurship in general, right?
Yeah.
And you would
Yeah.
know, you kind of read the room and see what the trends are and see what the customers, need.
Yeah.
And you bring that and you figure out how to
Yeah.
create that. So that's been the evolution.
I love it. I love it so much. And I think that community to me is one of my core values that has always been there. And so building community, making those safe places for supporting one another is it's just so important to our journey as entrepreneurs because we can't do this alone, right?
Can't do
It's
it alone. And
yeah.
Kimmy, as humans, like, dare I say, it's like
We're not
important
yeah.
to,
Yeah.
the funny thing is, like, I never thought I needed community. Like, this was
Yeah.
never I'm an introvert. I'm a loner. I travel by myself. And I think what that time in the world taught me was in those moments of challenge and those moments where your foundation is kind of
Mm-hmm.
shaken.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's when I first started realizing like I needed safe spaces.
Yeah.
And whatever that looks like for whoever, right? Like
Yeah.
either find or build those spaces. For
Yeah.
some people, it's a religious thing, right? Like they find a church community and that's
Yeah.
their foundation. Others find other ways. But this was the first time in my life where, I decided and just felt that I needed that.
Yeah.
And then made a business out of it. So,
Oh, I love it. I love that you saw the opportunity and you stepped into it and you saw the need. I mean, you
yeah.
saw the real need for that. So you talk about listening to your inner voice even when fear shows up. So how do you balance fear and then really still trust yourself to move forward in those times?
I think that's a really great question because I think the purpose of fear, as I've been learning over the last several years, doing a lot of sort of self work, is to obviously protect you from something. And it's a very um, what's the word I'm looking for? Like it's a reptilian brain kind of thing. Like you don't even think about it. Your body has a response. And I feel for me personally, in my personal evolution, my job is to check that a little bit, say, okay, that's there. I see what's going on. And then kind of turn on the part of my brain that can actually understand what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Is it a legitimate something that I need to be protected from? Is there something really chasing me? Is there a life and death situation here? Or like, is there still opportunity for me to make my own decision about it and not just
Right.
sort of, go with what the nervous system response is? And I think that's been really powerful for me in a lot of areas of my life. Like I've lived all over the country. Like I said, I travel by myself, and a lot of it is just learning myself,
Mm-hmm.
and taking that time and space to just identify what my needs are, what types of things are triggering to me, where that's coming from, and then sort of work my way through it so that I'm making more of a rational decision versus a subconscious nervous system decision.
Yeah.
So I do get scared,
Yeah. We
every
all
day
do,
I get
right?
scared. Every single day I get scared. I
Yeah.
launch something
Yeah.
new, I'm terrified. I have
And
to give it.
if we're not getting scared, we're not stretching ourselves, right? We're
I
not
agree.
growing.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
And what I'll say to that is I think some people are wired more for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't knock anyone that is still living from a place of fear. I think there's a reason for that, right? And
Mm.
people sort of evolve in different ways. I think there are very real kind of tangible, people in different situations that they do have
Right.
to be concerned about that stuff. But
Right.
um I think for those who are able to really take stock of what's going on and move beyond that, I think there's just so much opportunity for growth and expansion and just newness and freshness and
Yeah.
joy and sort of coming into whatever it is that you were meant to be here on this
Mm.
planet.
I love it so much. So you've been in roles of leadership within the corporate world and now you lead community. What have you learned over the years about leadership and just what's your leadership style, your personal leadership style?
I like to say that I offer human-centered leadership.
Mm-hmm.
I remember and am driven by the fact that we are all people first and foremost. Yes, we have missions to achieve and, KPIs to monitor and things like that. But at the end of the day, when there's a team of people who are coming together, it's a team of people who have had varied lived experiences that show up from time to time, and it's my job to understand those people, understand their needs and motivations, and then provide what I need to provide to help them feel safe and as though they can achieve their goals and then get out of their way. Like I like to say, let them do their thing. But I think the important thing is for them to feel safe. And,
Yeah.
I spend a lot of time building trust. That's
Yeah.
a core tenet in what I do. So when I consult, I primarily do interim executive consulting. So typically there's a tumultuous situation where a leader has been fired or resigns or something. And I have to kind of come in and rebuild things and stabilize things. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm a firm believer in that saying that everything moves at the speed of trust. And so
Mm.
before I'm in there, talking about strategy, like I need to know what's going on with you, how potentially like the transition is leaving you to feel, how can I help you feel more supported? And then do the best I can to let them know that, my job is just to support them as best as I can.
Yeah.
So human-centered leadership is the way that I think I define. And I go back to like high school and college where like I was the captain of the dance team, right? And we did really well. Everyone got along. There's a bunch of high school girls, and we all were friends. Like that's
Right.
pretty much an anomaly. And I think it's really because I let people be who they are. I
Mm-hmm.
don't take a whole lot of things personally. Recognize that, other things tend to show up, in situations of conflict, and I try and be very self-reflective. And I think that's carried me kind of throughout the leadership roles that I've held throughout my career.
Cool. Very cool. So your clients are they all consultants?
For the membership community, yes.
Yeah,
All
okay.
of the people who join are consultants, primarily women of color, and my clients, when I consult, are
Mm-hmm.
nonprofit organizations.
Okay. And when you are working with your consultant clients, what what challenges and opportunities are you seeing in the consulting space right now for your clients and and for yourself as things have changed over even since 2020, it's like how many versions of change have we gone through
Absolutely.
from a market perspective? I just would love to hear your perspective on the consulting space and just what you've experienced and what your clients have experienced.
What I will say to start is 2024 was rough for just about everyone
Yeah.
that I've worked with. There are a few outliers that I think
Hmm.
have navigated it uh, by pivoting their offerings. So
Hmm.
as opposed to strictly doing consulting, the women who have navigated it well this year are doing things like podcasts and monetizing that, creating YouTube channels and monetizing that, writing books and figuring out how to access new audiences that way.
Hmm.
So, consulting, I think people were kind of clutching their pocketbooks a little bit unless you were providing kind of very real, very tangible solutions to problems.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, there was less about the strategic visioning work and more about the we need an email marketing person to come rebuild our email marketing campaign. So that's what
Hmm.
I've been seeing, at least in our space. That people were less interested in, taking courses and that sort of thing, and more interested in what's going to solve my immediate problem like right now. And I've
Yeah.
even noticed that with an arm of the business that's kind of taken off unexpectedly, organizations started reaching out to us saying, again, we have this very specific, very immediate, very tangible need, and we need someone now to do this. And they didn't feel like going to vet people and going to find people and, doing the RFP process. And what we were able to do is just provide them very quickly referrals. And yes, they vet those people to make sure they fit what they need, but they didn't have to do the searching. So I think
Yeah.
what's been interesting is people want to do less things and they want
Yeah.
people to kind of just solve their problems immediately.
Yeah.
And I even tried to do a service this year. It was like remote advising, because I have worked remotely for 12 years. And I was noticing people were still having these challenges with remote work. And it didn't take off because I think they couldn't wrap their head around, like, what am I getting out of this, right? I'm
Yeah.
investing this time and this energy. I just want you to come in and tell me what the problem is. I want you to tell me and fix it, right?
Yeah.
So there's an attention thing that's really interesting, and a capacity for things that I think people may have had in the past that just we don't have anymore. That
Yeah.
I'm experiencing. People are tired and burnt out and drained, and they just want people to come in and solve their problems.
That's interesting perspective. And
Yeah.
I've definitely seen some different, challenges in the consulting space with some of my clients and people in my communities that I know. And what I've seen is that the opportunities are very specific to a need. Like right now, it's like this is an urgent need, and it doesn't tend to be kind of like you said, that big picture visioning, but something very specific where
Hmm.
companies are serving, and the importance of those long-term relationships and how that continued business comes through those long-term relationships. I think that's another key
And I
factor I've
will
seen.
yeah. And I think the other thing I've seen is there's longer for certain kinds of projects, there's a longer decision making runway.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I don't know, again, if people are just very protective of their budgets right now because of uncertainty, with the economy and inflation, and
yeah,
people didn't know what was going to happen with the election. There was just a lot of uncertainty that I think was giving people angst. So for certain kinds of work, something that you might have been able to close in a month or two is taking 4, 5, 6
yeah,
months.
yeah,
But again, the flip side of that is like the people, when they have those immediate needs, we've been able to place people in 2 weeks and they're signing
yeah,
contracts. So that
yeah,
it's an interesting, I
yeah.
think,
Interesting
chasm,
time. Yeah,
spectrum of what needs are and how people are kind of functioning
yeah.
right now.
And I also think that a lot of the people that I know in the consulting space are really hungry for rich conversations about changing dynamics in the workplaces, and like bringing real conscious leadership, so that they're hungry for a different conversation. So I think people who are stepping into those leadership roles, I think, are also finding new opportunities, as especially as we start to step into 2025, that there's a shift that's happening. It feels like energetically there is a shift happening as we move into 2025.
Yeah, I would agree. On
Yeah.
on several levels, I would agree. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. 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 So what lessons or values do you hope your kids take away from watching you on this journey? I love this question so much.
Um, so it's interesting. I give myself a hard time as a mom, because I work a lot, you know. I do have more flexibility to be able to, like I said earlier, show up to the volunteering at the Christmas thing on Thursday and, things like that. But in terms of just being present, I'm always so in my head.
Hmm.
So, I work. So this doesn't answer your question, but I actually worry about what that might be teaching them. However, I think the flip side is the kinds of conversations that we're able to have because I'm in this entrepreneurial space, I
Hmm.
think expand their viewpoint of what's possible.
Yeah.
So, when I was a kid, my parents taught me I was from the DC area. You get a good government job, you work there till you retire, you get your pension, I guess. I don't know if it was called a pension, but you get your pension, you get your retirement, and that's it. Then you live your life.
Yeah.
And I just remember being like, that was never, ever, 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 ever what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And so, I just hope that by the kids seeing me pivot, coming to some of my events and seeing me have to stand up and talking about the fact that I didn't get that contract necessarily that I wanted to get or how I was able to get it. And I just hope it expands their understanding of the way the world can operate,
Yeah.
and it helps them
Yeah.
understand and think expansively that there
Hmm.
aren't, while there are traditional ways that people might go about living, that those aren't the only ways.
Yeah.
And there
I so
is
agree. It's so
some
awesome to
benefit.
have our kids see us in a different
Oh,
light.
yeah.
It's so
And I
much more
remember,
expansive.
of course. And my daughter, she gave me like the most brilliant business idea. She had this one liner. She was 6 years old, and we were driving in the car, and I was sort of just talking out loud about a challenge that I was having. And she was like, Mommy, what if when the women pay you money, they get money? And so that sparked something like, okay, how can I create some sort of monetary value for the members in our community? And that's what actually sparked the idea of me supporting the women getting contracts. So
Hmm.
with organizations reaching out to us to fill their seats with our consultants. That
Okay.
was one of the things that, we were able to kind of build, because I was like, okay, if they're paying me this membership, how can I make sure that that return is putting money back in their pockets? So
Nice.
just the fact that they could even have articulate, sort of that sort of thing, and know that I can then pursue it and put into action and, talk about it with them. That's what I hope they get. I think it's just a bigger version and vision of what life could be.
I love that. And my son is actually grown, and he's got his own business that he runs on the Oregon coast, and he's done so well. And I love it when he picks up the phone and calls me to have mom advice about business. It's so, just something to look forward to as your kids
I
get
hope
older.
so. I hope they can
It
be like,
just it
"You were
makes
on your
fills my
phone all
heart.
the time."
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope I really do hope.
Yeah.
That's all you can do. I don't know, you know, I don't know what trauma this is bringing to their life that they're going to one day talk to their therapist about, like, mommy was always thinking about other things, or, whatever. But I do hope that, once they're older, they can understand, kind of
Yeah.
why I was doing this, and
Yeah. You see the
understand that,
expansiveness of it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yep.
Love it. I love it so much. So you've mentioned learning to love certain parts of yourself. Can you share those and how it's helped you lead with more confidence?
So I think I mentioned this conversation that I'm an introvert.
Uh-huh.
And
Hmm.
I remember
Me too,
always
by the way.
being, are you? And I
Yeah.
always remember being so ashamed isn't the right word, but
Yeah.
I felt some kind of way about
You
that.
wished you wished that you weren't. I mean, I definitely wished I
Yeah.
wasn't an introvert at some points in my life.
Yeah, for sure. And I would see people able to kind of, win the room and stand up in front of audiences and, just do their thing.
Hmm.
And I'm just not that. Right. And
Yeah.
so I think one thing I had to learn was the things that I do bring to the table as an introvert, sort of with my kind of introspective leadership, allowing people time and space to process things,
Hmm.
really listening and developing strong connections and relationships with people that I think also, helps my leadership style. And which is why
Yeah.
I think, a lot of my teams feel supported because I take the
Hmm.
time.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things I really had to learn to love, and especially as an entrepreneur, where, you're, at least in my field, where, you're seeing the influencers and the creators and they're all over social media. And that's just not my natural space. So I have to
Yeah.
figure out what I'm comfortable with, and just be comfortable leaning into that and saying that's my
Yeah.
gift to offer. I don't have
Yeah.
this, but I have this really good,
Yeah.
And I think, that's definitely one of the things that I had to learn to love
Yeah,
as I've gotten
yeah,
older.
definitely. It's like even when I was, really becoming a speaker early on, I was like, I thought, what should my speaker presence be? And when I learned I could just be me, it just was so much easier.
I'm still learning that. I honestly, that's a challenge I still have. I still feel like when like someone the other day was like, when you're on the TEDx stage, and I was like, that is the last thing that I ever want to do. But several people have said, your story is interesting and you have something to share. But I still have this vision in my mind of just these big, boisterous personalities standing on
Yeah,
front of the stage, and still having to reconcile that that's not me. So I'm actually still working through that piece.
yeah. We do a speaker training called Soul Speaks from the Stage,
Mm.
and I was the one that originally went into that training for myself, which was really helpful, right? To really like pull back the layers and let myself be.
Mhm.
And then eventually I ended up partnering with the founder Paula Friedland on that, and we host every February now. We do what we call Soul Speaks from the Stage, and it's all about like just being who you are and letting your stories come from within versus up in our head.
Mhm.
So it's really powerful work, but it was definitely something that helped me do some breakthroughs on that. So
Yeah, I've actually
yeah.
thought about 2025 being my year that I do some sort of speaker training.
Oh, well, maybe you should come out here in February.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah.
And seriously, this is not the first. This is probably at least the sixth time this has come up in probably the last 3 months. So
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. You're
yeah,
getting all the signposts, aren't you?
totally. What I just say,
Yeah.
you have to kind of listen, right?
Yeah.
So
Totally.
yeah.
Totally. Totally. I love it. So, where can people learn more about you and learn more about Katalyst?
Yeah, thank you. So I blab the most on LinkedIn. That's where I have the biggest presence. So you can follow me personally, just my name, Kamilah Martin. We have Katalyst Consulting Group is the business page. I just hired a marketing person and she's trying to force me onto Instagram a little bit more. So I'm also on Instagram at Katalyst Consult. And then like a YouTube channel that we're developing as well. But LinkedIn is the best place to connect.
Excellent, excellent. And then the final question I always close with are, what are 3 pearls of wisdom you'd like to share with us today? I know you've already shared lots of wisdom, but just a closing 3 pearls of wisdom.
Oh, hot seat. I would say one thing I always talk about is shaking off the supposed tos. I actually got an opportunity to get a quote in Oprah Daily a few years ago, and this is what
Cool.
I really talked about. And it kind of is along the lines of what we were talking about today, but how those supposed tos are very often blockers to living your truest, fullest, most expansive life. You get caught up in checking the boxes and you miss the things along the way. So I would say whenever that voice is like, this is what I'm supposed to do, or I'm supposed to, XYZ, just think about that a little bit. Maybe that is what you're supposed to do. Maybe that is your true path, but just be a little bit more intentional about that.
Yeah.
The second pearl of wisdom, I would say if you have never done it, take a solo trip somewhere.
Yeah.
Um,
Totally.
and I think a lot of not a lot, but some of my friends are scared to do that. Or, like I'll
I
eat by
love it.
myself in a restaurant in a heartbeat. I
Yeah.
will go to a movie by myself. And I think the first time I traveled by myself was, I think, right out of college. And it was just a completely different experience because, as you know, like you were with yourself, you have no one else to sort of ask or, agree with. There's a lot of space, there's a lot of quiet, and I'm just a firm believer in the power of solitude and the power of quiet, in sort of being able to, again, listen to those inner things that are coming up for you. And if you're a
Yeah.
journaler, it's a perfect time to journal some of those things that might come up. So anyway, travel by yourself if you can
Yeah,
somewhere.
my husband's been gone in the last 2 weeks, which is it's like I love the house all to myself when I get that space. And I love my husband dearly, but it's like I love that quiet space.
And maybe that's an introvert in us talking. I don't
Yeah,
know.
could be. And I had my great niece and nephew here over the weekend, which kind of really interrupted the moments of peace. So I had a bit of the yeah, I had a bit of the craziness in the mix in between the 2 weeks, but I really do enjoy the quiet. But it could be the introvert in us that's saying, "Oh, I need this space to just breathe." But
But it also might be why it's really valuable for extroverts too, because they're always,
totally, I would
buzzing.
agree.
So maybe it's
To
a
slow down and
valuable,
to listen.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
force them to do it.
yeah,
And the last one, I guess similar theme. Find some space for creativity, whatever that kind of looks like, whether it's dancing in the living room with music, whether it's listening to music, whether it's playing music, whether it's drawing, whether it's painting, whether it's photography, whatever that is. I feel like there's just something really powerful in that creation energy, that you learn a lot about yourself, but
yeah,
it also sort of taps into maybe parts of your brain that kind of opens up, that opens up ideas and opens
yeah,
up feelings.
yeah,
And I think it's just a full part of the human experience that, unless you consider yourself an artist or creative, that we don't really make a lot of time for. The kids do it naturally, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
if we're lucky enough to kind of have the space and create the space to play with them,
hmm,
we experience it then, but
yeah,
we lose that a lot. Creativity
yeah.
and play, I think, is I think the last tidbit that I would share.
I love it. And I love that so much because I think that gets us out of our thinking brain that's always going. It's like if we can really open into the creativity, newness comes in. So
Absolutely.
love it so much. Well, Kamilah, this was so much fun. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and just bringing all of your stories. And thank you for what you're doing in the world.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. This was a great conversation.
Thank you.